The carriage stopped at the foot of the long gravel drive, and for the length of one held breath, the woman inside it was someone she had never been. She wore her sister's traveling gown, her sister's pearl drops, her sister's name stitched into the lining of the trunk strapped behind. The footman who opened the door did not look at her face. He looked at the crest on the panel, the crest of a house she had come to deceive, and he bowed to the wrong twin without knowing it. Caldern Hall rose out of the autumn dusk like something carved rather than built. Gray stone gone gold at its western edge where the last sun touched it. 3 brides had crossed this threshold in 6 years. 3 had been carried back out under cloth, or so the county said. And the county said it in a hush, the way people speak of a thing they half believe in holy fear. The woman on the step had heard the whispers in every coaching in between home and here. She had counted them. She had decided they would not have a 4th. Her name was Marisol, though every soul at Caldern Hall would call her Delphine for as long as the deception held. Delphine was her elder by 11 minutes, her mirror in every line of the face, and Delphine was the one the contract named. Delphine was the one who had wept into her hands a fortnight ago and said she could not go, that she would rather take poison in her own bed than be married into that house of vanished women. So Marisol had taken her sister's place because she did not believe in curses, and because she did believe that, somewhere behind the rumor, sat a person who had done a thing and meant to do it again, and that a person could be watched and caught and stopped. You may think a woman cannot simply become her sister. The line is thinner than you would believe. Marisol had spent 23 years learning every gesture Delphine made, and she had spent the last fortnight unlearning herself. The doors opened before she reached them. A butler with a face like a closed ledger inclined his head, named her "My Lady," and led her into a hall where the candles had been lit early against the coming dark. Portraits climbed the staircase wall, men in armor and men in lace. A procession of Wickham dead watching the newest arrival with painted indifference at the top of the stairs. Where the light gathered, a man waited who did not come down. He was tall, and he held himself with the stillness of someone who had learned that stillness was safer than motion. Dark hair, cut close, gone iron at the temples, though he could not have been 40, a jaw set hard enough to ache. He wore a navy coat of plain, excellent cut and no jewel but a signet, and his eyes, when they found her, were the gray of slate under rain. He looked at her the way a man looks at a debt he must honor and does not want. "Miss Varel," he said. Not Delphine. Not my lady yet. He had given her the smallest distance the forms allowed. "Your Grace," she answered and curtsied, and felt her own heartbeat in the soft of her throat where the pearls lay. This was the Duke of Wykeham, whose name the county only ever spoke with the curse attached. Adrian, the servants called him, below stairs, never to his face. He came down the stairs, then one careful tread at a time, and when he reached her, he did not take her hand. He looked at it, gloved, and offered, and did not take it. "You will be tired," he said. "Marsh will show you your rooms. We do not keep late hours here." He turned and was gone through a door before she had straightened from the curtsy. She stood in the great cold hall with her hand still half lifted, and understood that she had been received the way one receives a parcel. The housekeeper Marsh, a thin woman with iron-colored hair scraped back so tight it pulled at her eyes, took up a candle, said, "This way, my lady," and led her up past the painted dead. The room they gave her was in the east wing, large and chill, the bed hung with curtains, the color of old wine. A window seat looked over the gardens, and beyond the gardens, a dark mass of yew, and beyond the yew, set apart, a second wing of the house, with every window shuttered and dark. Marisol stood at the glass a long while after Marsh had gone. She had not believed in curses when she climbed into the carriage, and she did not believe in them now. Yet a house has a logic, the way a sentence has a logic, and she had already begun to read this one. 3 brides gone, and a wing of the house sealed and watched. The 2 facts lay side by side in her mind and refused to part. She did not sleep. She sat at the window and counted the hours by the chiming of a clock below. And twice she saw a light move behind one of the shuttered windows of the far wing, low and shielded, the light of a single candle, carried by a single hand. The third time she rose to look, it had gone. In the morning, a maid named Polly brought chocolate and laid out a gown, and chattered while she did it, the way frightened young women chatter to fill a silence. Marisol learned more from Polly in 20 minutes than she had hoped to learn in a week. The Duke had married first at 29, a lady from the north who had taken a fever and died within the year. The second was a merchant's daughter, very rich, very pale, who had wasted in the same far wing and was buried in the same family vault. The third had been a quiet girl from Devon who lasted barely a season. Polly crossed herself when she said it. "And who tends the far wing now?" Marisol asked as lightly as she could manage, brushing at her own hair so that her face was turned away. Polly's chatter stopped as if a door had shut. "No one's to go there, my lady. It's her ladyship's part of the house." The Duke's aunt. She nursed all three of them, poor souls, and she'd not thank you to mention it. The Duke's aunt Marisol set down the brush very carefully. "And does her ladyship dine with us?" "She dines when she chooses," Polly said, and would say no more. Lady Sabine Vasterly came down to dinner that night. She entered the dining room the way a frost enters a garden, without sound and without haste, and the temperature of the room changed around her. She was perhaps 60, upright as a spindle, dressed in deep violet. That was not quite mourning, her gray hair, dressed high and a single black pearl at her throat. Her hands, when she folded them, were beautiful and very still. She looked at Marisol down the length of the polished table and smiled, and the smile did not reach the cold intelligence of her eyes. "So this is the bride," she said. "How young she looks. The young ones never do keep their health in this climate. I have buried 3. You know, I begin to feel I have a talent for it." The Duke set down his glass. "Sabine, I only mean to be kind," she said, smooth as the pearl at her throat. "The girl should know the house she has come to. We are not lucky in our brides at Caldern. I should hate for her to be surprised." It was the first voicing of the thing Marisol would hear 3 times in that house, and it came wrapped in courtesy, a private cruelty dressed as concern. The room she has come to is unlucky. She is too young, too frail. She will not keep. Marisol heard it for exactly what it was, a verdict pronounced before the trial, and she folded her own hands to keep them from shaking, and said, "I am stronger than I look, my lady. I had a sister once, who said I was the more stubborn of us 2. It was the only true thing she had said since she crossed the threshold, and she felt it land, and she felt the Duke's gray eyes move to her face and stay there a moment longer than courtesy required. Sabine's smile thinned by a degree. Then the soup was served, and the moment closed over like water. That night the light moved again behind the shuttered windows, and this time Marisol watched it the whole way along the dark wing, candle by candle, until it stopped at the farthest casement and went out. Someone was in that wing. Someone living, who carried a light, and who was not Lady Sabine, because Lady Sabine had been at the foot of the stairs taking leave of the Duke when it began to move. Marisol had heard her voice in the hall below. She began, then, to do the thing she had come to do. She watched, and she learned the rhythm of the house, the hours the servants kept, the hours the Duke shut himself in the library and did not come out. Lady Sabine took a tray to the sealed wing herself, every day at 4, and let no one carry it for her, and the door to it was kept locked, with a key she wore on a ribbon at her waist. The Duke and his aunt did not speak above 6 words to one another in a day, and the 6 words were always hers. And she learned slowly, across a week of careful evenings, that the Duke of Wycombe was not the man the county had built out of its fear. She came on him by accident in the library on the 8th night, when she could not sleep, and went down for a book. He was at the window with a single candle, not reading, looking out at the dark wing, and his face, when he did not know himself observed, was not cold at all. It was the face of a man standing at a grave. "He is forbidden to dig." "You should be abed, Miss Verrill," he said without turning. He had heard her after all. So should you, your grace. He turned then, the candle throwing his shadow up the spines of 1,000 books. Why did you come here, he asked. You knew what is said of this house. Everyone knows. Your father knew when he signed. And yet you came, and you do not flinch at my aunt's table, and you watch the far wing from your window every night as though you mean to memorize it. I have seen the candle move in your room, so I will ask you plainly. Why did you come? Marisol stood very still. She had prepared 100 lies and found in that moment that she wanted none of them. She had come to deceive this man, and she still meant to. In the matter of her name, in the matter of the far wing, she found she could not. Because I do not believe a house kills its brides, she said. I believe a person does. And I should like to know which person and why before I become the fourth. The silence that followed was so complete, she could hear the candle. The Duke looked at her as though she had spoken in a language he had given up hope of ever hearing again. Something moved behind his eyes, some long, locked thing, and for a moment she thought he would tell her everything. Then his face closed, the way the house closed, the way the wing closed, and he said, Only, go to bed, Miss Varel, and do not go near the east door of the far wing. Whatever you think you have understood, you have not understood it. The danger here is real. What she did not yet know was that he had said almost those exact words to a frightened girl from Devon 2 years before on a night very like this one, and that the girl from Devon was not in the family vault at all. She went up. She did not sleep. And in the smallest hour, when the house had gone fully dark, she heard a sound she had not heard before, faint through the floor and the long corridors, the sound of a woman weeping, and then a single word repeated. That might have been a name. The Duke had told her the danger was real, and she believed him. She did not believe it was his. What she did next was the heart of why she lived when others had not. She did not run, and she did not wait to be saved. She made herself useful, and she turned the very thing that should have frightened her into the lever by which she pried the house open. The household kept its accounts badly. Marisol had been raised by a father who farmed his own land and taught both his daughters to keep a ledger, and within a fortnight she had made herself indispensable in the still room and the linen press, where the housekeeper's books were a tangle no one had unpicked in years. It gave her reason to move through the house and to ask questions, the small, dull questions of a careful mistress, and the answers to small, dull questions are where the large truths hide. She found the first thread in the apothecary's ledger. Caldern Hole, bought laudanum, far more than a household of its size could account for, ordered quarterly, under Lady Sabine's own hand, and delivered to the sealed wing. A house in mourning has no use for sleeping draughts by the gallon. A house keeping someone asleep has every use for them. She found the second thread in the parish register, which she contrived to see one Sunday on the pretext of confirming the date of her own betrothal. 3 Duchesses of Wycombe were recorded as buried in the family vault, and the entries were in the same ink, the same hand, all 3 written at one sitting, by the look of them. The vicar was a soft, frightened man who would not meet her eye, and who had, Polly told her, received a new living and a new roof on his vicarage in the year the 3rd Duchess died. She found the 3rd thread herself, in the dark, on the night she could no longer bear the weeping, through the floor. She took a candle and went down in her shift and a shawl, to the gallery that joined the east wing to the west, and found the door to the far wing locked as she had known she would. A house that buys laudanum by the gallon employs a man to carry it, and that man was the under-gardener's son, 16 and soft-hearted, who had watched the new mistress untangle his mother's wage from the housekeeper's bad arithmetic, and restore 3 months of underpayment she had not known she was owed. Marisol had made one ally in that house without meaning to, and she made him willingly. Now the boy had a key, copied in the village against the day Lady Sabine took ill and someone must carry the tray. He gave it to her, his voice shaking, and asked only that she be kind to whoever she found. She found a woman. The far wing was not a sick room. It was a prison, dressed as one. 3 rooms ran along the dark corridor, 2 of them empty. the bed stripped, the air shut and stale. In the third, by the light of a guttering rushlight, a woman sat at the window, with her hands in her lap, thin as a reed, her dark hair grown long and loose, her eyes too large, in a face that had not seen the sun in 2 years. She was perhaps 25. She turned when the door opened, and the terror in her face was a thing Marisol would not forget. "You are not her," the woman whispered. "You are not Sabine." "No," Marisol said, and set down the candle and knelt by the chair so that they were eye to eye. "I am not. My name is Marisol. What is yours?" The woman's mouth worked as though the answer had rusted shut. "Honora," she said at last. "I was Honora. I was the Duke's wife. The third one. They told him I was dead. They told everyone." She gripped Marisol's wrist with a strength that astonished her. "Is he here? Is Adrian here? Does he know?" He did not know. Marisol understood it in a single stroke, the whole shape of the thing, the way you understand a sentence the moment its last word arrives. The Duke had stood at the library window grieving a wife in a vault that did not hold her. He had warned Marisol of a danger he believed in but had never seen, had buried a coffin he had been forbidden to open. He was not the murderer of his brides, he was their widower 3 times over, and not one of them had died. This was the thing the county feared and could not name. It was not a curse. It was a woman inviolate, with a black pearl at her throat and a key on a ribbon, who had married her nephew to a succession of brides, each chosen for a fortune or a fragile constitution, and who had not killed them, because a dead duchess is the end of a matter and a confined one is the beginning of a fortune. With each marriage, the bride's portion came under the household's hand, and the household's hand was Sabine's, 3 settlements, 3 rich dowries paid into a house she had ruled since her nephew was a boy, in mourning bands for his own mother. A bride who had wasted of a fever, nursed devotedly by the Duke's own aunt, mourned and buried, with a coffin weighted to the proper heft, asked no questions and answered none. And the Duke, who carried his griefs in silence and alone, had been the perfect mourner, because his grief was real. He grieved a death that had never happened, and the grief made the fraud unbreakable. Honora had not died of fever. She had been told her husband wished her gone, that he had signed her away, that the wing was his mercy and not his aunt's cruelty. 2 years of laudanum and a locked door and a voice at the keyhole telling her she was already dead to the world had nearly made it true. The merchant's daughter and the lady from the north had not died either, Honora said, weeping now openly. They had been sent away north, to a house on the coast that Sabine kept, where women who had ceased to matter were kept until they ceased entirely. Honora was the only one Sabine had not yet been able to move, because she had been the Duke's true love, and a true love is harder to vanish than a stranger. Marisol held the woman's thin hands and made her a promise in a whisper, and then she did the hardest thing she had done since she climbed into her sister's carriage. She left Honora in that room and locked the door again behind her, because she understood that if Sabine learned the wing had been opened before, there was proof a magistrate could not ignore. Honora would be gone by morning, move north in the dark, and the chance would not come again. She needed the law, and the law needed evidence, and the evidence was a forged register, a poisoner's ledger, and a living woman, and all 3 had to surface at once, in front of witnesses, where Sabine could not make them disappear. She had, perhaps, a week. Lady Sabine had begun to watch her. It came at dinner, 3 nights later, the second voicing of the verdict, and this time it was not private. The county had been invited, the magistrate Sir Hollis among them, a heavy, fair man who held the Wycombe living of justice in his gift, and dined where the dining was best. Lady Sabine wore her violet and her black pearl, and she waited until the second course, then said into a lull sweet as ever to the whole table, "Our new Duchess does not eat. Have you all remarked it? She grows pale. Tay. She keeps to her rooms. I have seen this exact decline 3 times in this house, and I confess it frightens me." There is a weakness in some constitutions that no climate can mend. I only pray we are not to lose a fourth. It was beautifully done. Marisol saw the whole table receive it, saw the seed of the next story planted in 20 minds at once, the bride who sickened, the aunt who saw it coming, the tragedy foretold, so that when it came it would seem only the keeping of a promise. Sir Hollis made a sympathetic noise into his wine. The Duke went white about the mouth and said nothing. And Marisol understood that her own death sentence had just been read aloud over the soup, dressed as a tender fear, witnessed by the very magistrate who would one day decline to investigate it. She set down her spoon. She was aware of the Duke's eyes on her, and of Sabine's, and of the whole bright table waiting to see whether the doomed bride would weep. She did not weep. She smiled at Lady Sabine down the length of the table and said, in a voice pitched to Carrie, how fortunate the others were then to have so devoted a nurse. I have been reading of the late duchesses, my lady. The parish keeps such careful records. 3 brides, 3 burials, and all 3 entries written in one ink on one afternoon, by the look of the page. I had not known the vicar so tidy a man. He must have a remarkable memory for dates. The candle flames did not gutter, but it felt as though they had. Sir Hollis looked up from his wine. The vicar at the foot of the table had gone, the color of tallow, and Lady Sabine, for the first and only time Marisol had seen, was for a moment perfectly still. Her beautiful hands frozen above her plate, her cold eyes fixed on the bride, who was not behaving as brides behaved. Then she laughed a light social laugh, and said something about the carelessness of country clergy, and the table laughed with her, relieved. The thing had been said. A seed of her own had been planted in the magistrate's mind, beside Sabine's, and both seeds would grow. That night, the Duke came to the door of her room, and he did not come in. He stood in the corridor with a candle and his face stripped of all its careful stillness. And he said, "What did you mean about the register? I think you know what I meant, Your Grace." "Tell me," he said, and his voice was not a command this time. It was nearer to a plea than a duke is permitted to come. "I have buried 3 women in this house, and have never once been permitted to look inside the coffins. My aunt forbade it. For my own grief," she said. "I have spent 6 years believing myself a man whose love is death to those who receive it. If you know something other than that, Miss Farrell, for the love of God, tell me." So she told him in the corridor by candlelight low and fast, the laudanum and the register, and the new roof on the vicarage, and the house on the northern coast, and last of all the woman at the window in the far wing, who had asked whether Adrian was here and whether he knew. She watched the 6 years of false grief leave his face, and a far worse thing arrive, the understanding of how thoroughly he had been used, how his own true sorrow had been the lock on his own wife's door. He put his hand against the wall as though the house had moved under him. "Honora is alive," he said. "She is alive. She has been 30 feet from your bed for 2 years. Bah! And if your aunt learns, we know. She will be gone before dawn, and there will be no proof at all, only a wing that smells of laudanum, and a forged page a frightened vicar will swear is true. We have one chance, Your Grace, and we must take it in the open. In front of witnesses Sabine cannot silence, with the woman herself produced, where Sir Hollis must look at her with his own eyes. Once. We have one throw." He looked at her for a long moment. This woman, he believed, was Delphine Varel, who had come to his cursed house and refused to be afraid of it, who had unpicked in 3 weeks a fraud that had buried him for 6 years. "Who are you?" he said. It was not quite a question. "I am stronger than I look," she said. "I told you that the first night she planned it the way her father had taught her to plan a harvest, every hand and every hour accounted for. Sir Hollis was to return on the day of the harvest ball, the largest gathering Kildern Hall had seen in years, the whole county under one roof, because Sabine could not vanish a woman in front of 100 witnesses and a magistrate, and Sabine's whole power lay in the quiet. Marisol meant to take the quiet from her. The Duke procured, by a writ Sir Hollis, signed without quite understanding what he signed, in order to open the family vault on a question of the late Duchess's entailed jewels, a matter so dull and so legal that Sabine could not object to it without seeming to have something to hide. The undergardener's son kept his key and his courage. And Marisol sat 3 nights with Honora in the dark, feeding her strength back with broth and bread carried under a shawl, teaching her that she was not dead, that her husband had not signed her away, that in 4 days she would walk down a staircase into a room full of light and her own name would be given back to her. On the 3rd night, Lady Sabine came to the far wing at her usual hour, and found the laudanum untouched on the tray she had left 3 days running, and the woman at the window stronger than she had been in 2 years. She said nothing. She smiled at Honora through the bars of the chair back, as she always did, and she went away. Marisol, watching from the gallery, saw her pause at the foot of the stairs and look up, slowly, toward the east wing where the new bride slept. And she knew that Sabine had begun to count the same way she counted, and had arrived at the same sum. The blow fell the next morning. Marisol woke to find Polly gone. Dismissed in the night, the undergardener's son turned off without a character, and her own door locked from the outside. A tray came at noon, carried by a manservant she did not know, and on it a cup of chocolate she did not drink, because she had read the laudanum ledger and knew to the grain how much a household could hide in something sweet. She poured it away, and broke the cup, and hid the pieces, and when the man came back at evening and saw the empty cup, he nodded, satisfied, and that was worse than anything because it meant the next cup would be stronger. She had 2 days locked in a room at the top of the house. Her allies dismissed her one chance the harvest ball the day after tomorrow, and the only soul who knew the truth, a man who had spent 6 years doing exactly as his aunt told him. She met it alone in a locked room, listening to a house prepare for a ball. She was not meant to survive to attend. She did not weep. She thought of her sister, safe at home, who had been right to be afraid, and wrong to think. Fear was the end of the matter. She thought of Honora at her window, and of 3 women on a cold northern coast, waiting, whether they knew it or not, for someone to remember they had ever mattered. And she sat down on the floor with her back against the locked door, and made herself, again, useful. She took the pins from her hair. A house that locks a clever woman in a room has forgotten that the woman is clever. The lock was old, and the key had been turned from outside, and her father's land had taught her hands 100 small competences a duchess was never meant to need. It took her the better part of the night. The lock gave just before dawn. She did not run. She had nowhere to run, that Sabine did not own. Instead, she went in the gray before light to the library, and found the Duke awake in it, as she had known she would, because a man whose whole life has just been shown to be a lie does not sleep. She told him what had been done, the dismissals, the locked door, the cup, and watched the last of his careful stillness burn away. She means to do it at the ball, Marisol said, or just after. A bride who collapses in the night after weeks of failing health, the whole county has been told to expect, nursed by her devoted aunt, dead by morning. Sir Hollis will sign the certificate himself, because he was warned. It is the same play. She has made 3 times, Your Grace. And it has never once failed, because every player but her was kept in the dark. We are not in the dark anymore. We will not let her choose the hour. We will choose it tonight. In front of everyone, the harvest ball at Calderon Hall was the most brilliant the county could remember, and Marisol, when she came down the great staircase past the painted Wycombe dead, was the most brilliant thing in it. She wore cream and the Wycombe pearls, and she had slept 2 hours and looked as though she had slept 10, because she had decided to, the way she decided everything. Lady Sabine, at the foot of the stairs in her violet, watched her descend with an expression of tender concern that did not falter, and said to the woman beside her just loud enough, the third voicing of the verdict, "Does she not look fevered to you? I have such fears for her. I have seen this color 3 times now. I pray I am wrong." It was the last time she would ever say it, and she said it to a witness who, days later, would remember that she had been told in advance exactly what was going to happen by the only person who could have made it happen. Marisol crossed the floor to the Duke, who stood by the great fireplace, and she put her gloved hand in his, and this time he took it. The room saw it. Half of it had come to watch a doomed bride, and instead it saw the Duke of Wickham, who had not touched a woman's hand in public in 6 years, hold this one's as though it were the last solid thing in the world. Sir Hollis arrived at 9. At 1:30 by arrangement, 2 grave men of the Duke's household carried in a long object under cloth, and set it down before the assembled company, and the Duke, in a voice that silenced the music, announced that on the magistrate's own writ, the family vault had that afternoon been opened in the matter of the entailed jewels of the late duchesses, and the law required Sir Hollis to view the contents and confirm them. The coffin of the 3rd Duchess of Wycombe was brought up and opened in the Great Hall, before 100 witnesses, because the law once invoked could not be sent back to its room by a woman in violet. The coffin held sand and stones and a weighting of iron, and no woman at all. The hall went so silent that the fire was the loudest thing in it. Sir Hollis stood over the open box with his fair, heavy face gone slack, and Lady Sabine for the first time took a step backward. Into that silence Marisol said clearly, "The Duchess is not dead, Sir Hollis. She has never been dead. She is in this house, and has been for 2 years, in the far wing, under lock and laudanum, while a forged page in the parish register and a coffin full of stones told the world she was in the ground. I will show you. Send your own men. Take her ladyship's key from her waist." Sabine moved then, fast for an old woman, toward the great doors, and found them held shut by the Duke's grooms, who had their orders. She turned at bay in the center of the bright floor. 100 faces ringed around her, and Marisol watched the cold intelligence in her eyes do the only thing left to it, which was to fight. She did not crumble. She drew herself up to her full spindle height, and said in a voice that still commanded, "This girl is hysterical. She is fevered, as I have warned you all for weeks. She has broken into a sick room where a poor, mad kinswoman of mine is kept for her own safety and the family's peace, and she has spun this whole grotesque fancy from a sick mind. Ask the vicar, ask Sir Hollis. I have nursed 3 brides through their illnesses with my own hands. Will you take the word of a stranger over the word of the house that has sheltered her? The woman in the far wing is mad and dangerous, and to bring her down here is to invite a scene that will shame this family for a generation." She turned to the magistrate. "Sir Hollis, you have known this family 30 years. I appeal to you. It was a good defense, and very nearly enough. Half the room wanted to believe it, because the other thing was too terrible," and Sir Hollis wavered visibly, his eyes going from the box of stones to the upright old woman who had dined at his table 40 times. For one long moment, the verdict hung, and might have gone either way on nothing but which woman the room chose to believe. And then Honora came down the stairs. No one had fetched her. She had heard the great unnatural silence of 100 people who had stopped breathing at once, and she had found her own door unlocked because the undergardener's son, before he was turned off, had passed his copied key to the one person Sabine had not thought to dismiss, the old woman who washed the linen, who had loved the 3rd Duchess and had waited 6 years for a reason to be brave. Honora came down the great staircase, past the painted Wycombe dead in a borrowed gown too big for her wasted frame, her dark hair loose, her 2 large eyes moving over the upturned faces until they found one face by the fireplace and stopped. She did not look mad. She looked like a woman returned from the dead, which she was, and the whole county saw at a single stroke that everything the stranger had said was true and everything the aunt had said was a lie, because no mad woman ever walked into a room with such terrible composure. "Adrian," Honora said. The Duke crossed the floor. He did not run. He crossed it the way a man crosses the last distance of a thing he had given up hope of. One step, and then another, and stopped before his wife, and the whole county heard him say the only words the moment needed. "You are alive." I never signed you away. He had not made a speech. He had restored a marriage and broken a fraud, and named the lie in a single breath in the same hall where the lie had ruled for 6 years. And it was enough, because the truth, once it has a living face, does not require a speech. Honora put her thin hand against his chest, over his heart, as if to be sure it was beating, and the great hall which had come to watch a bride die, watched instead a dead woman live. Sir Hollis found his voice. He took Lady Sabine's key from her waist himself, his fair face hard now, all his comfortable wavering gone, because a magistrate may overlook a great deal until it is laid open in a box of stones before 100 of his peers. And then he may overlook nothing. He sent his men to the far wing, and they came back with the laudanum and the locked door and the stripped beds, where 2 other women had been kept before they were moved north. And within the week riders brought back the merchant's daughter and the lady from the north, thin and dazed and astonished to be in the sun. 3 brides, and not one of them had died. The county had been right that no bride survived Caldern Hall, as Sabine's, and wrong about the reason. All the years it had whispered the wrong word for the right fear. Lady Sabine was not killed, and she was not hanged, though there were those who said she ought to have been. She was a duke's aunt and a peer's daughter, and the family that prosecutes its own to the scaffold pays a price in name that the law allows it to refuse. She was stripped of every key and every penny, and the management of every household she had ruled for 40 years, and she was sent to a small, cold house on her own northern coast, the very coast where she had warehoused the women she had ruined, watched by servants who answered to the duke and not to her. It was not vengeance. It was correction, exact and total and bloodless. The last anyone at Caldern saw of her, she went out the great doors without a single person rising to bid her farewell, and she did not look back, because nothing in that house was hers any longer, and she had always understood better than anyone what it was to be made to cease to matter. There remained one truth still locked in the house, and Marisol unlocked it last, because it was her own. She told the duke, in the quiet after, that she was not Delphine. She told him of the sister who could not come, the fortnight she had spent learning to be her own twin, the whole deception of her name. She told him, expecting to be sent away in disgrace, because she had married into his house under a lie, and a lie is a lie even when it saves 3 women's lives. He listened to all of it, the new lines of grief and relief still raw in his face. And when she had finished, he was quiet a long while. Then he said, Delphine Verrill would have done the prudent thing and stayed home, and 3 women would still be in the dark. You are the one who came. I do not want the one who stayed home. He said her true name. Then the first time anyone in that house had spoken it aloud, and it landed in the room, like a key turning in a lock that had rusted shut for years. Marisol, he said, that is your name. I should like to learn it properly, if you will let me. We are neither of us married, it seems. I have only ever had one wife, and she has been returned to me, and she is my dearest friend and was never anything else, for the marriage was Sabine's making and not ours, and Honora has told me so herself this very morning. There is no one in the world I am bound to, but the truth. And the truth came to this house wearing the wrong name, and saved every soul in it, and I should be a fool to let her leave. There was a great deal to settle, and they settled it slowly, in the way of a world that is just, but slow. Honora was restored, in law and in the world's eyes, to her name, and her rank, and her own portion, and finding the marriage a thing made by a dead woman's cruelty, rather than by any choice of theirs, she and the Duke parted, as the friends they had been before Sabine ever made them more, and the law, with the magistrate now eager to oblige, done made what fraud had made. The merchant's daughter went home to a father who had mourned her 4 years, and would not let her out of his sight. The lady from the north married in time, a man who had loved her before Caldern and had never believed the story of her death. The far wing of Caldern Hall was opened to the light, the shutters taken down, the lock struck off, and the laudanum poured into the autumn ground, where nothing grew for a season and then everything did. By the following spring, Marisol Varel married the Duke of Wycombe in the small grey church where the forged register still sat, the false page cut out of it now and the truth written plain in the vicar's chastened hand. Delphine stood up with her sister and wept, and said into her ear that she had been the more stubborn of the two of them all along, and had been right not to believe in curses. The county came, every soul of it, and not one of them whispered, because there was nothing left to whisper, the fear having at last been given its true name. On the night before the wedding, Marisol went up alone to the far wing, a guest wing now, full of light and clean linen, and she stood at the casement where she had once knelt beside a woman the world believed was dead. The candle she carried was the only one, and she did not need it, for the spring moon came clean through the unshuttered glass and lay across the floor where the lock had been struck off the door. She thought of 3 women in the sun. She thought of her sister weeping with relief downstairs. She thought of a man who had grieved a death that never happened and had learned to love the truth instead, in the person of a woman who had come to his house under the wrong name and refused to be afraid of it. If this story has stayed with you, hold a moment for the women who were almost forgotten, and for the stubborn one who would not let them be. They were worth remembering. So is whatever brought you here tonight. She set the candle in the window, where once a single shielded light had moved behind shutters and gone out, and where now it could be seen for a mile across the dark country, burning steadily, hidden from no one. Then she went down to the warm rooms below, where the fire was lit, and her sister was laughing, and the man she would marry in the morning had saved her a place by the hearth, and she took it and stayed.